Hi, my name's Allison Siegel, and I'm going to be presenting on inferential statistics today. Now, most of this information can be found in Chapter 6 of our textbook. Um, so, let's get started. Now, there are two main types of statistics. Yes, there are other types, but for the purpose of this presentation and our class, um, I'm going to talk about the two main ones, which are descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. Now, I know the topic is about selecting inferential statistics. However, I really wanted to make sure that we have a strong foundation before we get into that, because I know me personally, it's been a while since I've studied statistics. So a nice little review, refresher, build up the foundational skills is something I personally need. If you don't, you can skip ahead a little bit to getting into the selecting part. However, I really wanted to include this because I personally need it. When we talk about statistics, there are two types, as I mentioned before. In descriptive statistics, you are describing a population. You're going to organize it, summarize it, simplify, and present the information you've gathered. With inferential statistics, you're going to take a sample from the population. So it's a distinction between using the whole population in descriptive, and inferential is using a sample. Also, in inferential statistics, we are making hypothesis or asking research questions and making a prediction to what we think will happen. Descriptive, the goal is to describe the population, to describe the new incoming class of college freshmen. Are there more girls than boys? You're describing it. Where inferential is you're making a prediction. So there's the difference. Okay, quick quiz. All right. So I want you to identify what types of statistics should be used for these research questions. So, first one, how many university students experience high stress? Do you think this is descriptive or inferential? All right, pause it if you need a moment to think about it. Otherwise, we are going to keep going. The correct answer is descriptive. You are talking about the whole population. You're not singling out level of education. You're not singling out a gender, an ethnicity. You are just describing university students experience high levels of stress. All right, next question. Do female students experience higher stress than male students? Is this descriptive or inferential? All right, pause it if you want more time to think. Otherwise, the correct answer is inferential. All right, again, you are taking a certain sample of the population. So you are looking at female students versus male students in a select sample. This quiz was just something good to test your foundations before we move on. Again, it's really important to understand the difference. With descriptive statistics, you are focusing on organizing, summarizing, and presenting your information. Where inferential statistics, you are using a sample. So you are applying what you find in that sample to the whole population. You are going to make a hypothesis, and you're trying to assess the relationships among the variables or make a comparison between the variables. Common tests used in inferential statistics: t-test, confidence intervals, z-test, regression analysis, chi-squared test, and analysis of variance. There are more tests, but as you all know, we are not that far in the book. There are many more chapters and many more tests that we are going to learn about and discover. So I just chose to focus on the ones that we've talked about, or chi-square test will be coming up, I believe, in the next module. So trying to focus on what we have done so far. Now, that is a lot of different tests I listed, and we haven't even gotten halfway through the semester. So how do we pick what test to use? Now, this is a bit of a tricky question to answer. All right, now I am only talking about inferential statistics here. I'm not talking about descriptive statistics. That's something different. All right, so we want to use 4 different things. We want to look at the type of questions. Is it a difference question? Is it an association question or hypothesis? The numbers of variables matters also. The type of data, is it nominal, ordinal? And is this an independent or a repeated? All right, so I'm going to start by talking about the types of questions. When you are using different questions and you are trying to compare the groups, t-test and a variance analysis are really good to use. When you are doing association questions and you are testing the strength of the association, you want to be looking at correlation analysis, bivariate regression, and multiple regression. Now, this is just a general one. When we get into the exact number of variables, how many variables are independent versus dependent, and the type of data, this gets much more complicated. So it's easy to just look at the type of hypothesis or questions being asked first. Now to get into the nitty-gritty. Now, if you have only 2 variables, one dependent, one independent, and you are using a difference question. So notice you need 2 variables and a difference question. Then you want to look at the type of data the independent variable is. This will determine what test is recommended you use. Now, if you are looking at independent samples, your test will be different than a repeated measure. Again, if you look at the table, you will see a lot of these tests we haven't talked about yet. So a lot of this information is going to be really good to kind of like highlight the section in chapter 6 that I'm basing this on, and save this as we're moving forward as a great way to determine how to answer the questions for the discussion posts. But again, this is if there are only 2 variables and a difference question. Now, if an association question is being used, then you're going to be looking at this chart here on slide 15. Now, with association questions, both variables are the same type of data, except there's one exception. If one is a scale and one is nominal. Otherwise, they need to be the same type of data. Again, this is when you're using 2 variables and association question. Now, it gets more complicated the more variables you add. And again, it keeps being divided by difference and association, the type of question you're asking. So this is not one of those straightforward, if you have 2 variables, use this test. That there's a lot of different options, and you really need to understand your data and the hypothesis and research questions you're trying to ask in order to conduct the correct analysis. As mentioned, things get more and more complicated. When you have three or more variables, so that means one dependent variable and two or more independent variables. When you look at the chart, you start to notice there is NA. NA, for the purpose of this presentation, just means that there isn't a common or specific test you should be using, which is super helpful. However, this is when you're using three or more variables and a difference question. You will notice when you look at three or more variables and using an association question, there is no NA, and actually it's a lot of using regression analysis, which is really interesting. Again, all of my information is taken from our textbook and chapter 6. For more information about how to select the correct inferential statistics test, please see chapter 6 in our textbook. Again, I hope the biggest thing you can get out of this presentation, that as we move forward, I think that we have to have a grasp of what exactly our research questions and the hypothesis that we're trying to test is asking, and the type of data and amount of variables we want to look at. These things will determine what kind of test we should be using. And I think that it's really awesome in our textbook that they have all these great charts and how to select inferential statistics. However, sometimes they're not always useful. As I mentioned, when you get into three or more variables, you're starting to see there isn't anything common. Sometimes there are more than one test listed. So I hope as we get more and more comfortable with this class and using statistics, it'll be more natural to use this. However, in the meantime, Chapter 6 is going to be a great resource for all of us. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. In case you didn't guess, this presentation is straight out of the textbook. All the images were either created by myself, stock images from Microsoft Office, or I think I used one or two public images that had like no copyright or creator information. But if you have any questions about anything, please comment. Thank you so much, and have a great weekend, everyone.